It just means you're not paying any friggin' attention to me. That's what it means. Hello, folks. Howdy, it's Monday. We got Game 7 tonight. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, but we'll start with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
All right. Let's talk about how all of a sudden, earlier today, I was listening to SiriusXM, and they break in with breaking news. MLB is now opening an investigation into David Fletcher with the gambling with the Los Angeles Angels. Okay. Here's a reality. The reality is the last investigation didn't go very well. The public perception of that was poor. And to be honest, even though the feds said everything's cool, not everybody believes that, right? Okay. But we moved past that. So now all of a sudden, there's this David Fletcher thing. Mm-hmm. Don't we believe that if they looked into it the first time, that they would have found other things that first time? And again, I wrote an article on Full Press going on 2-3 weeks ago, where I pointed out the other states that baseball gambling is illegal, and Texas is one of them. And don't you think Major League Baseball should get ahead of that now and start looking at those states and possible bookmakers and those things before all of this just becomes like a big mushroom cloud? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Okay, Dennis, I've been consistent with this. This smelled from the very beginning. The whole situation with the interpreter for Ohtani and him betting $3 billion or whatever ridiculous amount it was. I mean, it just stunk. And of course, I was a history guy. I almost had my master's in history, and I did a lot of research. One of the master's thesis ideas I had was on the Black Sox scandal. So I know it, through and through. And I know that after they suspended the 8 players, the eight White Sox, a few years later, after Kennesaw Mountain Landis, the commissioner of the league, said he had cleaned up baseball and baseball was pure now, as pure as the driven snow, Tris Speaker and Ty Cobb were implicated in a gambling situation, and Landis made sure that Cobb was traded from Detroit to Philadelphia and Speaker from Boston to Philadelphia, and they were relegated to being basically bench players on the Philadelphia A's at the end of their career. So they weren't banned, but they were penalized. Why? Because nobody knows. But the thing is that this sport has a history of covering up stuff that they want to cover up. I don't know whether that's the case here, but it needed to be investigated, and it wasn't. And now if it's drip, 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 it's like Watergate. You get it out before, it's fine. If you have drip, 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 it's going to come back and bite you in the ass.
Yeah, and the thing is, and you used the right comparison there by Watergate. If you don't get ahead of these controversies or mini controversies, whatever you want to call them, you're always playing catch up, and you're never successful that way. It always, the dam always bursts. But I think this probably leads to a bigger discussion about the legalization of sports gambling and how the leagues aren't really handling it very well. I mean, just look at the NHL. Shane Pinto got suspended,
right?
And they said, well, they kind of tap danced around what he did. To me, the argument is you can't do business with bookmakers and then say, well, our players aren't going to gamble. Of course they're going to gamble. I mean, just go through sports history. The Black Sox, Ty Cobb, as Mike mentioned. Go back to Paul Hornung in the 60s with the Packers. And Michael Jordan. Who was more of a gambler than Michael Jordan?
You mean Michael Jordan, who was in Atlantic City by day and New York by night during the Knicks Bulls series?
Yeah, that would be the one.
You mean the guy who bets $100,000 on a round of golf?
Yeah,
Michael Jordan.
Calvin Ridley with the I guess when he was with the Atlanta Falcons. Yeah. You're suspending him, but in the same breath, you're doing business with bookmakers. I mean, Charles Barkley on Inside the NBA makes no bones about how much he gambles. So I don't think, and the broadcast partners watch a game, any game. I don't care what sport. They have the lines. They have the lines between periods, between quarters.
It's real time. I mean, I'm watching Dallas, Colorado game 7, and I don't know, it was Kenny Albert, I think. And he was like, well, the FanDuel line is -120 for both Dallas and Colorado. I don't give a shit.
Yeah,
but there's somebody at home that'll jump in.
Somebody else does. That's a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, and right. So someone else does, and I'm sure there are players around the leagues that I watch the games, and okay, I'm going to put some money down on this team because it has this guy, and I know he's good, or whatever. So I think the leagues opened up this Pandora's box, and it's going to get worse for them before it gets better.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, and we're going down this road. And this is the thing, every state has different gambling rules and regulations. I remember a few years ago, New Jersey, you could have the apps and everything was open, and New York was like, pure. Again, it was pure as the driven snow. And I think New York now it's changed, but different states had different rules, and if you're going to have that. It's sort of like, different states have different rules about marijuana. It's like, how can you bust players from the NBA who play for the Denver Nuggets if they're smoking marijuana, if it's legal in that state? Things like that. There's inconsistencies in the law here. But if Major League Baseball has a rule against gambling and these players gamble, now they say Ohtani didn't gamble. And there's no proof that Ohtani gambled, but it really smells that his interpreter gambled as much as he did when he was making $150,000-$200,000 a year, and he's betting millions.
Yeah,
something's not right. So I think and it was, who is it, Russ? Tisha Thompson from ESPN, that was the one who wrote the Fletcher stuff. Investigative reporters are going to keep digging on this, and it's going to keep going. It's not going to go away. And if he did something wrong, they will find out. So we'll see. All right, let's get the show started. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, May 20th, 2024.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Lagello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com, and we're joined by special guest Dennis Gorman, who we've had on the show in the past and on Off the Post. Dennis, thank you for being on the show. Appreciate it.
Anytime, boys. I'm glad to be here.
Okay, let's start. We'll finish with Game 7 between Vancouver and Edmonton. I want to start with the impending series that's going to start on Wednesday between the Panthers and the New York Rangers. Russ and I have a slight disagreement on this. I mean, he picked Florida to win the Cup. I picked the Rangers to get to the final. I didn't pick a winner. I had Rangers in Dallas. I was extremely enthused at this selection, Dennis, after they had swept Washington and then up 3-2 and down 3-1 and going into the third period of Game 6, I was starting to be a little afraid that the Rangers were going to be able to put the capper on it, but then they score 4 goals in the third period and win 5-3, and now face it. I think it's the best matchup we could expect in the East. I think it's the two best teams. First, what do you think of the Rangers and what they did against Carolina, and then we can move on to the matchup.
I thought going into that series, I gave the edge to the Rangers simply because Igor Shesterkin is a better goaltender than Freddie Anderson.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And you go back to the third period of Game 6. I think the first Chris Kreider's first or second goal, it was a bad goal, and
the first one,
and you could just see the Rangers kind of surged from there, and the Hurricanes didn't have any answers, and you could see it coming from a mile away. And that's why I thought that matchup was going to be the X factor, and I think everyone thought that matchup was going to be the X factor in that series. So, now they're playing a pretty good Florida team who Sergei Bobrovsky hasn't had a great playoffs yet, but he hasn't had to be great.
Right.
But I think he is certainly the best goaltender they have played in these playoffs so far.
Yeah, no, I mean that's not saying much because they played against Charlie Lindgren in the first series, and Anderson. Maple Leaf fans are well known about Freddie Anderson's negative impact when it comes to the playoffs, and I didn't think he played badly up to Game 6, but Game 6, that goal,
that was when it came.
That was the momentum sucker that destroyed them. And I mean, Russ, I've been legion in my criticism of Freddie Anderson, and now I feel justified.
Yeah, same here. I mean, and this was his best year because he had so much time off because of the injury and everything else situation, and it still didn't happen. So, his stock has dropped. There's no question tremendously now because now everybody's going to think the same thing. I think Shesterkin, for all the worry that was there for him late in the season, it was just didn't matter. He turned the switch, and he's fine. But couple things did happen. One that was missed by me because I was at the Met game. Don't ask why. I just Mets Phillies. I just was.
Glutton for punishment.
Gorman knows. I show up to a certain amount. It's just a sickness. But anyhow, when the Rangers were down, Carolina's social media wrote "cry" in capital letters, and then when the Rangers went up, the Empire State Building said "you first." Because Carolina is always first to jump on that stuff, and it's like, you know what? That's when you got burned. So that made me laugh. That was funny. I picked Florida at the start of the year, start of the playoff season to win the Cup. I thought the Rangers would make it to the conference final. I did, and the only reason I have Florida over the Rangers, and I think Shesterkin's a little bit better than Bob, is because they're a little bit more physical, and they do have 4 better lines. The Rangers have more depth now than they used to, and maybe Blake Wheeler comes back, but they still don't have the 4 lines that could be rolled the same way as Florida does. And the Rangers' offense coming from their defensemen is waning a bit, even from Fox. And so that to me is a little worrisome because all of a sudden Gustav Forsling is scoring at a tremendous rate, which you never know who's going to get hot in the playoffs, right?
Yeah, and Montour is a monster, and has been the last couple of playoffs. Dennis, let's just break it down point by point here because I agree. I think Shesterkin has an advantage, not a big advantage over Bobrovsky. Defensively, normally I would give the Rangers the advantage, but if you're talking depth, and you look at that 4, 5, 6 on the Panthers with Kulikov, with Ekman Larson, I'm drawing a blank. You had Ekblad, Montour, Forsling. I mean, their 1 through 6 is very good. The Rangers, I mean, I love the top 5, but Eric Gustafsson is a train wreck. I think he is so bad defensively, and one of the things I think that Laviolette didn't do during the season was give somebody like Zach Jones enough playing time that he would be a viable option. Now, if all of a sudden they saw Gustafsson was a liability, who do they go to? Chad Ruedel? They really can't go to anybody. So I think the depth wise, the Rangers are hurting because they have to play Gustafsson in the playoffs.
Well, and it's interesting. I did a story in November, way back in November for Newsday, right after Adam Fox got hurt, and they put Zach Jones in the lineup, and basically Laviolette talked about that he liked Zach Jones, but and talking about Zach Jones, he kind of touched on Eric Gustafsson. He has all the faith in the world in Eric Gustafsson. He believes in his puck moving, and I know he thought it was
good for half a season. Now he's flatlined for half a season now.
I don't disagree, but he sold on the puck moving aspect, and he can run your second power play unit, and I think that's important. But I also think look at the body of work, and that to me is a real question mark.
Yeah, I mean, talked about on the Locked On Flyers podcast that I do. When Laviolette was there, he got stuck on this guy, Harry Zolnicek. He would throw him in, and he wasn't really an NHLer, but he would get an occasional goal, and then that would fuel Laviolette for the next 10 games to throw him in there. And this is the same thing with Gustafsson. He hasn't been good in half a year, but that's his guy. That's his one guy that he knows that's gonna play his way, but he stinks.
Harry Zolnicek was the Stu Bickle of Philadelphia.
Yes. So, I look at this series. I think Kachuk's a difference maker. Look, I mean, Zibanejad, for all the worry about him, I wasn't particularly worried. He's come back to form, but like I said, I'm a little worried about Adam Fox. Adam Fox has not played great. I don't think Miller's played particularly great defensively. I think that's something where, because of his lack of physicality, he gets caught up in some bad spots. And I think this is the small margin of error that I think could put Florida ahead. Because honestly, while we all know Shesterkin's better than Bob, I'm pretty sure Bob, as competitive as he is, would love to beat his countrymen. Because then all of a sudden people could stop. I mean, I think people have finally stopped talking about how much money Bob makes, because the last 2 years have been really, really good. But this would really put an end to it if he won this series.
Yeah, although I think the big move that Laviolette made in Game 6 was flip-flopping the pairings. He moved Trouba up with Miller, and he shifted Schneider down with Gustafsson. And I'm pretty sure they played their top two pairings, a lot more than that third pairing. So it limited the liability of Gustafsson. And they're probably going to have to do that again in this series.
But the other problem is, as good of a prospect, and he's still a prospect, maybe not anymore. Now he's played enough. But Schneider's in between. He was brought up a little too soon. He's still not quite the guy that he was in juniors. He's serviceable, right, Dennis? But he's more surviving than thriving.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
I believe he was. I guess he and Trouba were paired together, if I'm not mistaken. Or and that was at the end of the season, and I think that was kind of done. Essentially, I think Laviolette's hand was kind of, he was forced into doing it because he had gone with Fox, Lindgren, Miller, Trouba, and for a lot of the year, the very online Ranger fans were screaming, "You got to split up Miller and Trouba."
Right.
They don't complement each other. And when he split them up, they had actually played pretty well. Separately, they played pretty well, with their new partners. But Game 6, he went back to Miller Trouba because it's something that, in some ways, it had worked a little bit. So they're comfortable with it. He's comfortable with it. So, unless things change dramatically in the next 24, 48 hours, I'm assuming we're going to see Fox Lindgren is your first pair.
Right.
Miller Trouba is the second pair.
Right.
Gustafsson Schneider's the third pair.
Right.
Yeah.
Now
he's going to go chalk.
Yeah.
Yes.
To start the series at least. Now I think the most intriguing aspect of this series, Dennis, is a Florida team that, let's face it, they're dirty. They revel in being dirty. They have guys who love that type of game. Nick Cousins, Lomborg, Bennett, especially, who out Marchand in the series against the Bruins, and that they have other real physical players as well, and they're going to try to, I think, not intimidate. It's not 1975 Flyers, but they're going to try to be physical. They're going to try to hit, and I'll bet you they'll target guys like Panarin, like they targeted Pasternak in the series against the Bruins. To my mind, that means Rempe has to be in the lineup. I think he absolutely has to be in the lineup. And not just at home. I mean, he's got to be in the lineup for every game, unless the referees are calling like ridiculous penalties on him, which they have in the past. I think Rempe's got to be in the lineup as sort of a sheriff. And if he's not, I think Florida will try to take advantage of the Rangers.
Then I have some really bad news for you, because in practice today, they had Phil Heidel skating on the third line with Alex Wenberg and Capo Caco, and Will Cooley was on the fourth line, and Matt Rempe evidently was nowhere to be found.
Wow!
So they're going to ask Cooley to do the dirty work, but the thing is,
and Trouba.
I understand. Well, Trouba too. I understand what's going on here, though. Like, we all think Rempe should be in there because of what he represents, but Laviolette is tired of having the referees calling iffy hits as penalties, and they're going to call at least one a game on this kid, and so that's the yin and the yang of it, as I see it, Dennis.
Well, Dennis, let me just add this: if they don't play Rempe in game one, then Peter Laviolette is adopting the Mike Babcock school of intimidation. Our power play is our intimidation. That doesn't work, especially in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, their power play killed Washington in the first round.
Yeah,
it killed Carolina in the second round. But if you look at Florida's numbers, they're not a team that gets penalized an awful lot, and they play a lot of their games at 5-on-5, and they can generate offense at 5-on-5 and stymie your offense at 5-on-5. And if we know anything about these Rangers, they are not a great 5-on-5 team. So if it is a 5-on-5 series, I tend to think that benefits the Panthers.
Agreed.
Oh yeah. I think it does.
It's going to be interesting, and like I said, it doesn't start until Wednesday. So
here's the biggest question, though.
Yep.
Last game that I was at, which was before I went on vacation, was game one.
Game 2.
No, game two. Yeah, game 2. That's right. It was game 2, and we saw Michael J. Fox and Jason Bateman together. I feel like we need to see Liam Neeson there, Dennis, to really set the mood right. Has he been there lately? I don't think he's been there.
No. You need Margot Robbie there. She's much prettier.
Liam Neeson would set the tone, I think.
I mean, I think both Liam Neeson and Margot Robbie would be pretty good tone setters.
Okay.
I mean, you had the Teen Wolves in stereo there, Jason Bateman and Michael J. Fox, and
there was a while there where Liam Neeson seemed to be going pretty regularly. Now he might be actually filming movies again. I don't know.
No, he's too busy doing voiceovers for the NHL of their commercials.
Oh, he is making there's a remake of The Naked Gun, and he's in the Leslie Nielsen role.
Oh no!
Oh my God!
Why are they doing that?
Yeah, that just ruins it. Come on.
Yeah. He's a good actor, but
I wonder if P. Diddy is doing the Nordberg role.
Oh boy! All right, let's move on.
Sorry, I had to go there. Okay, 2 questions from the chat that I wanted to answer. One was Rick, who was asking, I know Nak isn't on, but any insight on the Matvei Michkov rumors? Okay, it's just, it's been out there in sort of the rumor sphere. Nothing really coming from the Flyers organization. It sounds, though, like there is a pathway potentially for Michkov to come over, not next year, as a lot of people thought, but this summer. And if the question is, we don't know if that's going to happen, but let's assume that it does. Russ, if that happens, the rebuild is over with, isn't it?
No, it's just what they're going to do is, I'm texting somebody to see if I can get some info on Michkov.
Okay. Live here.
Anyhow, I think the issue is if he comes over, he has to be. The last word was he has to be guaranteed NHL playing time, or he's going to go back.
Right.
So, and I'm sure they're going to write in there a contingency, like you can't put him in 5 minutes a game. So he's going to have to
European assignment clause. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's going to have to get used. So I believe if he comes over, they're going to have to pick up like a good Russian player who's a UFA to mentor him offensively. Yes, they have some they have Zamula there and stuff, but just having another young Russian defenseman doesn't help. You need a Russian offensive player. Like I brought up Kuzmenko and you brought up Tarasenko. Tarasenko, I think, is a little too expensive for the age. Kuzmenko, a little faster, a little younger.
But he's not a free agent. They'd have to trade for him. He's got another year with Calgary.
Oh, he does. I thought he was a free agent. Okay.
No,
so then Tarasenko's a free agent. So that's fine. Radulov, forget about Tony. But the thing is, he's got to learn from somebody. Somebody's going to have to show him the ropes. And if you don't have somebody who's Russian, chances are he's not going to be able to learn enough English terms for the start of the season. So I just think it's all flux right now. And so we don't really have anything concrete. And if you use Google Translator, you're going to lose every time. Dennis, I brought that up on another show. If you have to rely on Google Translator to write articles, you're going to be out of business quick.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Don't have to go any further than that. No. But yeah, so I mean, nobody knows the trouble I see. No, nobody knows what's going on with this situation. Everybody's keeping their cards close to the vest. I bet you if we do find out it'll be closer to the draft. This smacks me as something that would break in Vegas, But I think right now
it probably has to happen before then because he probably has to go to rookie camp, get settled into the city, figure out his living arrangement. You know what I mean?
Right.
It probably has to happen a little before then.
Right. Well, the development camp is after the draft, so I would say by the draft we'll know one way or the other. The other question that was in the chat was my feelings on the Berube hiring. Let's just say this: I'm not against it. I'm not a big pom-pom waver when it comes to Berube. He did win a cup in 2019. He did take a team that was last overall in December and turned them, along with Binnington getting hot and everything going right. And then they had good years after that. So I think he might be the right coach at the right time for the Leafs because I think the message from Sheldon Keefe got stale. I don't think Keefe was a bad coach. No. I just don't think after 5 years the message was getting through. But Dennis, as somebody with an outside perspective, my perspective covering the Leafs as long as I have is that you could hire the best coach in the world. If you don't change up that group, they are never winning.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, go back to that St. Louis team that Berube won the cup with. They had Alex Pietrangelo, they had Colton Parayko. Those guys aren't on the Leafs.
Nope.
The Leafs' number one defenseman is Morgan Riley, and he's a good offensive defenseman, but I think on a really good team, he'd be your number two or number three defenseman.
Yeah. He's a great second pairing defenseman and an okay complement to a number one, but he's not a number one at all.
Yeah, I drew this comparison. I said Morgan Riley used to the Leafs what Ryan McDonough was to the John Tortorella, Elaine Vigneault Rangers.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good comparison. I mean, although McDonough was more of a defensive defenseman,
yes,
and Riley is a power play guy, and that's the thing. Riley's a power play guy who does not have a shot, so they need a power play quarterback. He's a great puck distributor. He's a good skater. He's a good playmaker, but he's just not that guy who's going to play 25 minutes a night. They don't have that guy. I don't know if it's possible for them to get that guy, but the only way they can is if they trade one of those core players, clear the salary, or trade them for a defenseman or a goaltender, which they also need. So, I mean, like I said, I don't think the Berube hiring is bad, but I don't think it cures all ills. And if they
Craig Button had a quote on Sirius. I heard the soundbite where he said, "Doesn't matter who you bring in for coaching, unless you get this roster straight, you're still going to have trouble." And I agree with him. By the way, we really haven't talked about Sheldon Keefe recording a video somewhere on a beach or an island or whatever. There's water behind him.
No, it was up in the lakes north of Toronto.
Where he's got water behind him. Okay, My whole point is this, and Dennis will agree with this. Like, I go back to Brad Richards, who was more than happy to spend his Rangers money on his Hampton house, and I think still lives out there as far as I know.
Right.
And Sheldon Keefe is going to be exactly like Mike Babcock, and he is going to hang out and spend that sweet MLSE money while doing nothing and recouping. That's what it seems like.
Okay. No, well, all right.
Well, let Dennis answer first.
Yeah, okay. Dennis, you first.
I mean, I think he's going to enjoy his off season, but I had heard a rumor that he might have been talking with the Devils about their opening.
Right.
But if you're him, you don't have to take the first job that opens up. Like you have options right now. You can. I mean, would I take the Devils job? I think there are a lot of positives about that job.
Sure.
But if, let's say, a team that views itself as a contender, let's say Vegas, for argument's sake, let's say for whatever reason Vegas gets off to a slow start next year.
Mm-hmm.
Bruce Boudreau loses the room, he gets fired. Would they be interested in Sheldon Keefe? It's not out of the realm of possibility that they would come knocking on his door.
Mm-hmm.
I think he has the benefit of having time on his side.
Yeah, no, I mean, okay, I'll say this. It's like MLS&E has a history of doing this. And it's not Babcock, but you go back to Randy Carlisle back in 2013 when they made the playoffs, and then they had the 18-wheeler going over the cliff, and they gave him a 2-year contract extension. And then the following January, he was fired. So there was no reason to. He was going into the final year of his contract, and they gave him an extension. In this instance, they gave Sheldon Keefe an extension. Why? Because they had fired Kyle Dubas, and they didn't want to have to hire a coach and a general manager in the same summer as Brad Treliving comes in. So for organizational stability, they gave him a 2-year contract, and then after they missed the playoffs, they fire him. It's only money for MLS&E, but it's not a good look. And great. He can sit back in Muskoka and enjoy his summer and eat that $3 million. What's that?
He could buy a new boat.
Yeah. No, I mean, whatever.
I don't think he's going to be in a rush to get back.
He's not. But okay, if you ask my opinion, he's waiting around for Mike Sullivan to get fired, so he goes to Pittsburgh. I think
that too. I think that's the case.
Yeah, I think that's a very distinct possibility. Not that Kyle Dubas is telling him wait around, but when you're making $3 million a year and you're not doing anything, that's pretty nice. I mean, he can keep his hand in the game.
More than that, but yeah, it's still pretty nice.
Well, no, Babcock was a spiteful jerk because he was an asshole to his players, and they fired him because they were never going to win with that jerk. And then he decided he was going to, and there was a little back and forth spite, Russ, because the Leafs would not give any team permission to talk to Babcock. Right. That team agreed that they would pay him the full $6.5 million, which was
so they could get off the hook.
Right, so they can get off the hook. So by doing that, they froze him out for 4 more years, and then the day after his contract expires, he signs the contract with Columbus.
I know,
so
but he still walked away with what, $20-something million?
$50 million for 8 years, and he only coached
50 in total, but like a lot of it for not working. Yeah.
So
we all want that job.
Oh, sure, but the Devils' job, I mean, okay, so it sounds like Keefe might be interested, but it doesn't sound like they have an idea from him whether he wants to coach or not. McClellan's been interviewed. Yeah. They didn't seem very interested in Travis Green, and Green goes to Ottawa. Have you heard any other names possibly for the Devils?
No, it's been very, very quiet right now.
Yeah, that's a weird thing, Dennis. It's like it almost seems like the Devils are not going to get their choice, but they're going to get whoever decides that they still want to work and will work for that. They're not a plum job right now. That's what it seems like.
Which
should be. It should be a plum job, wouldn't you think?
Well, you say that because you like the players, but we don't know what goes on in the hierarchy there, and that could be part of it.
Well, and that's a fair point. We don't know what's going on in the hierarchy, but to Mike's point, you look at that roster and some of the cap space that they have, and you figure, okay, maybe they go out this summer and pull off the trade for Markstrom. You had you finally have your first legitimate number one goaltender since Corey Schneider pre-hip injuries.
Right.
And then you add maybe a physical defenseman to partner with Dougie Hamilton. Then you have Dougie Hamilton, physical defenseman, Jonas Siegenthaler, John Marino, Luke Hughes.
Nemec.
As your third pair.
Well, Luke Hughes you have to manage. Like he's propensity for turnovers really started to show up late in that season. Nemec is actually going to be ahead of him defensively, but not offensively. Like there's someone who's got to come in that's got to have a strong defensive background to really get those young defensemen going, because that's really what hurt them as much as the goaltending.
Yeah, I mean, a Pesci would be a big fit for them. Yeah. But do you want to pay $6 million for Pesci?
Pesci or Brady Shea type. I mean, Brady Shea's more of a puck mover, but
I don't think Shea will leave Carolina. I think Brendan Moore wants to keep him. He's a Brendan Moore kind of player, so I think he's going to end up signing.
I think that's true. And then up front they have a lot of weapons. But to Russ's earlier point about the turnovers, that was a problem with Alex Holtz this year, and it drove Lindy Ruff to distraction. I know there was one game where Holtz had scored a goal early in the game, but later on in the period, he threw a pass up the middle that got intercepted, and someone scored, and Lindy Ruff basically benched him for the rest of the game.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then after the game, he was asked about it, and Lindy said to the reporter, "Well, you must not watch hockey very well." and
I hope he doesn't say that to me next year.
He will.
He will. And all hell broke loose on Twitter for like 2 or 3 days about how Lindy's a dinosaur, and you got to just live with the mistakes. And having learned under guys like having covered guys like John Tortorella and Elaine Vigneault and some other guys, having learned from them, you want talented offensive players to be able to make plays, but you don't want them making dumb mistakes. And throwing a puck up the middle when you have two guys closing in on you is a dumb mistake.
Correct. Yeah, no, the only thing that I would think would have a chilling effect on any coaching candidate in New Jersey is if they looked at the medical on Dougie Hamilton and thought that he wasn't going to be back. And then, then you're talking about not only not having a number one goaltender, although Allen is an upgrade from what they had last year, but if Hamilton is not there and you're talking about a defense with, Nemec and Hughes and a lot of young guys, that's a challenge.
Let me ask you this. I'm going to throw a name out there. Because if I were with the Devils, I would want to ask permission to get permission granted to talk to him. What about Michael Pekka? His stock is on the rise.
His stock is on the rise, but I'm not sure the Rangers would grant permission, especially after the gong show that took place late in the season at the Garden with the line brawl to start the game. I just think there's a lot of after the game. Immediately after the game and the next day, there was still a lot of animosity amongst both sides, talking about each other. So I'm not sure that the Rangers are in any sort of state to do the Devils a favor.
Russ, I know that Pekka's name was mentioned after Don Granato got fired. His name was mentioned amongst a number of different potential candidates, but clearly the Sabres were going to go in the direction of a veteran coach, accountability. After Granato was a first-time coach, I don't think they were going to go for another first-time coach. But, his lineage when it came to the Sabres was definitely something that people looked at. And, He had a lot of experience with some of the young players that played in Rochester that are now on the Sabres roster. And yeah, his star is on the rise. So I think he'll be an NHL head coach within 2 or 3 years, probably.
I mean, I'll give you another name because he can handle the metro area and think is deserving of another shot. And he was with Ottawa this year, Jack Capuano. I actually don't mind him as a coach. I think there's some good things about Cappy, as we used to like to call him. But, I thought he was a pretty good coach. What about you, Dennis?
I think considering the rosters he was given, the fact that he was able to get some of those teams into the playoffs and to win rounds and play pretty competitive series, I thought he did a lot of good work. And if you look at how the Islanders progressed post his tenure, a lot of the tenets were there, in terms of they want, playing, being a tough, responsible team, being aggressive offensively. And then obviously when Barry came in, he changed a lot of the philosophies, but
yeah,
some were still similar.
Just to touch on Game 7 tonight before we end the show. Game 7, Vancouver, Edmonton, and okay, I can be completely wrong here. I picked Edmonton in this series, and anybody who knows me, that I did that basically holding back my vomit.
Michael said he did it under duress. I don't know what.
Yeah, no, I with a gun to my head, but I just didn't think that without Thatcher Demko that the Canucks were going to have an opportunity to win. And Svilovs has played very well, but Dennis, the fact that Brock Besser is out for Game 7 and for the rest of the postseason with blood clotting issue. I mean, how many challenges can Vancouver get over? And this might be a bridge too far.
I mean, it might be similar to what happened to the Knicks yesterday. Once the Knicks lost Jalen Brunson, it was just one too many injuries to overcome, one too many blows to overcome.
Yeah.
But with that said, the Oilers are probably starting Stu Skinner in goal tonight.
Yeah.
Which is a little crazy, but yeah.
Do you feel real comfortable with Stu Skinner? Like, it wouldn't surprise me if Vancouver found a way to steal a game. I mean, I wouldn't bet the mortgage on it.
Well, Vancouver's defense lets Edmonton get right to the net 4 or 5 times a game, easy.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know what to make of this game.
It's a toss-up, but yeah, like I've not been on the Edmonton bandwagon all year. I mean, for as great as...
All right, so here's how it worked for me, Dennis. Preseason, I picked them to make it to the conference finals, right? Mm-hmm. Then everything happened, and I said, I'm jumping off this. Then they did make – now they are close to make it to the conference finals. I did pick them in this series, but I admit this game – this is where, honestly, and this is not me being like a hot take guy or anything, because Draisaitl's a great player, and he's actually setting some – Mick Kern pointed out on Sirius, he's got some goals now that he's hit, some records or close to records that are close with Wayne Gretzky's name in it. Basically playoff numbers and such. I think it was playoff numbers. Anyhow, if McDavid and Draisaitl can't step up and win this game, then there's something wrong. Like, this is the game where they have to do it. Like, if you went back in the annals and you look at Gretzky and Messier, there were going to be those games where they just took over a game and they did it. This is their opportunity to do it because Vancouver, Pettersson's playing a little better, but I don't think he's hurt. I think he's hurt. I don't think they have a player that could actually do that, where Edmonton's got 2.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Edmonton's got 2 game breakers. Vancouver's got really nice players, and there's a difference there. Again, my theory all year has essentially been McDavid, Draisaitl, top 5 players in the league, unbelievable players. Mm-hmm. I don't trust that defense. I don't trust that goaltending.
Nope.
And it's going to catch them and bite them.
Yeah, no, I mean, got 100 points in 60 games.
They're Toronto West, Russ. They're a top-heavy offensive team that's invested and overinvested in forwards, and you've got Draisaitl, and I completely agree, top 5 talent in the league. And then you add Hyman, who's got 10 goals in the playoffs, and Kane and Nugent Hopkins. And then your defense has Cody Ceci and Brett Kulak. And so, I mean, they're completely top heavy, and their goaltending can't steal games. Now, like I said, with Vancouver, with not having Besser and not having Demko, I like the only way they win is it's a game that goes to overtime and they win like 2-1 or 3-2.
I don't think it's going to overtime. I don't think it. I think I think somebody's getting blown out. That's what I think's happening, and I don't know which team it's going to be.
Well, I mean, I know Elliot Friedman basically said he thought that one team was just going to jump on the other team, get like a 2 or 3 goal lead. And
I think that's what's going to happen. I'm in
agreement with
him. Yeah, so we'll all be watching that tonight, and I know that I'll be rooting for a certain team that wears blue and white.
I will tell you this: listening to Sirius, a lot of fans are driving hundreds of miles to Vancouver, Edmonton fans, to go see that game. And boy, if they lose that game, that would be a bitter, bitter drive back because you got to drive through Moose Country and everything else to get back.
Build a wall on the Alberta British Columbia border. All right, we'll talk about that on Wednesday. Thanks to Dennis Gorman for joining us. For Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.